The champagne stung my eyes, a pathetic echo of the tears I refused to shed. Around me, laughter bounced off the manicured lawns of my sister's engagement party, each peel a tiny shard of glass twisting deeper into the wound. They celebrated her happiness, her perfect life, completely oblivious to the wreckage they had made of mine. They raised their glasses to a future she didn't deserve, built on a foundation of lies and my silent suffering. If you've ever felt betrayed by your own family, especially a sister, subscribe now and share your story in the comments. The truth is, I'd always been in my sister Vivian's shadow. She was the golden child, the one who excelled at everything, effortlessly charming everyone she met. I, Stella, was the reliable one, the one who organized things, who made sure everything ran smoothly. I was the admin, both at the family business and, apparently, in their lives. It wasn't a role I resented, not exactly. I took pride in my competence, in being the glue that held things together. But there was a difference between being appreciated and being invisible. And lately, I'd felt overwhelmingly invisible. The engagement party was the tipping point, the moment my carefully constructed facade of acceptance began to crumble. It wasn't just the years of subtle digs, the backhanded compliments disguised as concern. It was the blatant disregard, the casual dismissal of my worth that had become their trademark. The party was in full swing, a lavish affair that screamed Vivian's brand of ostentatious elegance. Guests mingled, their voices a droning hum punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. I circulated, refilling drinks and making small talk, a ghost in my own family celebration. My parents beamed, basking in the reflected glow of Vivian's happiness. They had always favored her, a bias so ingrained it had become an unspoken truth. Vivian could do no wrong. Her successes were celebrated, her failures excused. My achievements, on the other hand, were met with polite nods and thinly veiled comparisons to my sister's accomplishments. Even my presence at the family company, where I managed the day-to-day operations, was diminished, framed as a mere stepping stone for Vivian's future takeover. The injustice of it all simmered beneath the surface, a slow burn that threatened to erupt. Then came the speeches. My father, predictably, lavished praise on Vivian and her fiancé, Charles, painting a rosy picture of their perfect future. My mother followed suit, gushing about their compatibility and the joy they brought to the family. When it was Vivian's turn, she took the microphone with a practiced air of confidence. She thanked everyone for coming, showering Charles with affection and admiration. And then she turned her attention to me. "And of course," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness, "I couldn't have done any of this without my dear Stella, always so organized, so helpful."
She's just admin, but someone has to keep things running smoothly, right? The laughter that rippled through the crowd felt like a physical blow. My face flushed, my hands trembling. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the manicured lawn and escape the humiliation. But I stood my ground, forcing a smile, pretending that her words didn't slice me open, that this wasn't the latest in a long line of public put-downs, that I had not felt this way for a very long time. It's hard to be in my own body at these times. The person I trusted most was one of them. My supposed best friend, Sarah, doubled over with laughter, clutching Vivian's arm. They had been inseparable since childhood, a dynamic I had always accepted, even encouraged. But in that moment, their shared laughter felt like a betrayal, a confirmation of my outsider status. Sarah knew how much Vivian's words stung. She knew how hard I worked, how much I sacrificed for the family. And yet, she stood there, reveling in my humiliation. My vision blurred, my chest tightened. I needed to get out, to escape this suffocating atmosphere of the party. I made my excuses, mumbling something about a headache, and retreated to the relative sanctuary of the gardens. The air was thick with the scent of roses, but even their beauty couldn't soothe the ache in my heart. The injustice of it all was a crushing weight, a burden I had carried for far too long. I knew in that moment that something had to change. I could no longer tolerate being the invisible woman, the doormat for my family's ambitions. The problem with some people is that they expect too much. The days that followed were a blur of forced smiles and simmering resentment. Back at the office, Vivian's admin comment hung in the air, a constant reminder of my perceived insignificance. She breezed in late, as usual, radiating an air of effortless superiority, while I was already buried in spreadsheets, juggling invoices and client calls. My attempts to discuss her lack of involvement were met with dismissive waves and promises to get around to it later. Later never came. Instead, she focused on planning her wedding, delegating the actual work to me, effectively turning me into her personal assistant. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that this was temporary, that I needed to maintain the peace, for the sake of the family, for the sake of the business. But with each passing day, the weight of her entitlement grew heavier, crushing my spirit. Sleepless nights became the norm, my mind racing with calculations and what-ifs. I saw the crimson stain of the ink on the spreadsheets, the red flags she had caused, and I had fixed. I tossed and turned, haunted by the echo of laughter at the party, Sarah's betrayal, my parents' blind adoration of Vivian.
I tried talking to my parents, hoping they would see the unfairness of the situation, but my concerns were brushed aside as sibling rivalry. "Vivian's just excited about the wedding," my mother said, patting my hand dismissively. "Don't be so sensitive, Stella. You know she doesn't mean anything by it." My father chimed in, reminding me of my responsibilities to the family, emphasizing the importance of supporting Vivian during this special time. Their words were like salt in an open wound, a confirmation that my feelings were irrelevant, that Vivian's happiness was their only priority. I felt invisible, unheard, trapped in a cycle of expectation and disappointment. So much so that it made me feel like leaving this world. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the office, I found myself staring at a bottle of pills in the medicine cabinet. The darkness seemed inviting, a promise of escape from the suffocating pressure. But then I thought of my grandmother, her strength and resilience in the face of adversity. She would never have given up, never allowed anyone to dim her light. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't either. Instead, I decided to confront Vivian directly, to lay bare my feelings and demand a change. I found her at a bridal boutique, surrounded by tulle and satin, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I took a deep breath and began to speak, my voice trembling with emotion. I told her how much her words at the party had hurt, how her constant dismissal of my contributions made me feel worthless. I explained how her lack of involvement in the business was putting undue stress on me, how I was struggling to keep everything afloat while she planned her lavish wedding. I had rehearsed my speech 1,000 times, carefully crafting each sentence to be both honest and respectful. But as the words left my mouth, I saw a flicker of annoyance in Vivian's eyes, a hardening of her expression. She listened, her arms crossed, her lips pursed. When I was finished, she let out a sigh, as if I were a tiresome child making unreasonable demands. "Stella," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "you're making a mountain out of a molehill. I'm getting married. I have a lot on my plate. Can't you just be happy for me for once?" She accused me of being jealous, of trying to sabotage her happiness. She twisted my words, portraying me as the villain, the selfish sister who couldn't stand to see her succeed. I walked away feeling defeated, my hopes shattered, my resolve weakened. It was clear that Vivian was incapable of empathy, that she would never acknowledge the pain she inflicted. The breaking point came a few weeks later, during a crucial meeting with a potential investor. Vivian, who had promised to attend, was nowhere to be found. She had conveniently forgotten about it, claiming she had a last-minute appointment with her wedding planner. I was left to handle the meeting alone, scrambling to answer questions I wasn't prepared for, struggling to maintain the facade of competence that had become my trademark. The investor, visibly unimpressed, left without committing, leaving the company's future hanging in the balance. When Vivian finally sauntered in, hours later, she offered a perfunctory apology, dismissing the incident as a minor setback. "Don't worry, Stella," she said, patting my arm. "You'll figure it out. You always do." That was it. That was the moment I snapped. Years of suppressed anger, of silent suffering, erupted in a torrent of rage. I screamed at her, unleashing all the pent-up frustration and resentment that had been festering inside me. I accused her of being selfish, entitled, and utterly incapable of empathy. I told her that I was done, that I would no longer tolerate being her doormat, her invisible assistant. I saw the shock on her face, the flicker of fear in her eyes. For the first time, I had broken through her carefully constructed facade of invincibility. But it was too late. The damage was done. I had reached my limit. I could no longer pretend. I walked out of the office, leaving Vivian standing there, speechless, the weight of her actions finally settling upon her shoulders. I knew there was no turning back. This was where the game truly began. I couldn't bring myself to return, to face Vivian's smug superiority, my parents' disappointment. I was adrift, lost in a sea of uncertainty, with no direction and no hope of rescue. I was on the very precipice, looking into an abyss, a bottomless chasm of despair. The darkness beckoned, promising solace, a permanent escape from the pain. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me, a refusal to surrender completely. Days bled into weeks, each one marked by a deepening sense of isolation. I shut myself off from the world, ignoring calls and texts from concerned friends and family. I couldn't explain the turmoil raging inside me, the crushing weight of betrayal and disappointment. I spent hours staring out the window, watching the world go by, feeling like a ghost, disconnected from the vibrant tapestry of life. Food lost its appeal, and I existed on a diet of coffee and stale crackers, my body mirroring the emptiness within. The apartment became a reflection of my internal state, cluttered and neglected, a testament to my spiraling descent. I had always been the organized one, the one who kept everything in order, but now chaos reigned, both inside and out. I felt like a broken machine, stripped of my purpose, discarded and forgotten. My breaking point was not far from becoming the end. The memory of the pills still lingered, an open door to oblivion. But oblivion was surrender, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. One afternoon, while rummaging through a box of old photographs, I stumbled upon a picture of my grandmother. Her eyes, crinkled with age, held a spark of unwavering determination. She had faced countless hardships in her life, but she had never allowed them to break her. She had always taught me to stand up for myself, to fight for what I believed in, to never let anyone dim my light. Her image was a jolt, a reminder of the strength that lay dormant within me. I realized that I couldn't let Vivian win. I couldn't let her define me, to dictate my worth. I had to reclaim my life, to find my own path, to prove to myself that I was more than just admin. It was a tiny spark, barely visible in the darkness, but it was enough to ignite a flicker of hope. I started small, forcing myself to shower, to eat a proper meal, to clean the apartment. Each small act of self-care was a victory, a step towards reclaiming my agency. I began to research my options, exploring new career paths, dusting off old skills. The world outside my window no longer seemed so daunting, so unattainable. It was a slow, arduous process, but with each passing day, I felt a little stronger, a little more resilient. I started keeping a journal, pouring out my thoughts and feelings onto the page, unraveling the tangled mess of emotions that had been consuming me. Writing became my therapy, a way to process the pain and to chart a course forward. I reread old emails, work documents, anything that could give me a clearer picture of the situation at the family company. The more I pieced together, the more I realized how deeply Vivian's incompetence had affected the business and how much I had covered up for her over the years. The potential investor we lost, the missed deadlines, the neglected clients, it was all a direct result of her selfishness and lack of commitment. And then there were the whispers I'd heard over the years, things I'd dismissed at the time as paranoia, discrepancies in the accounts, shady deals, hushed conversations. I had always trusted my family implicitly, but now I began to question everything. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface began to coalesce into a cold, hard determination. I would not let them get away with this. I would not let them destroy my life and the company my grandfather had built. The time for silence was over. The time for planning had begun. I smiled. I acted broken. But I was recording everything. I dove deep, becoming a ghost in my own life. I needed information, and information was power. I started small, requesting every document I'd ever touched at the company: emails, invoices, contracts. Vivian had been sloppy, leaving a trail of digital breadcrumbs that told a story she never intended to share. Late nights became my domain, fueled by caffeine and the burning desire for retribution. I learned how to scrub metadata, trace IP addresses, and recover deleted files. Every line of code, every hidden folder was a piece of the puzzle, revealing a web of deceit that extended far beyond mere incompetence. I discovered falsified expense reports, inflated invoices, and a secret offshore account that had been siphoning funds from the company for years. It was all there in black and white, a testament to Vivian's greed and my family's blind trust. I realized that Vivian was not just incompetent, she was actively stealing from the company. The crimson started to show in the balance sheets. The glass in my hand shattered as my vision blurred. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings anymore. This was about justice, about protecting the legacy my grandfather had built. One close call nearly blew my cover. Vivian, suspicious of my sudden departure and radio silence, showed up at my apartment unannounced. I barely had time to slam my laptop shut, concealing the incriminating evidence on the screen. She feigned concern, asking if I was okay, suggesting we grab coffee and talk things out. I played along, feigning depression, telling her I was overwhelmed and needed space. I even shed a few tears for good measure, reinforcing the image of a broken woman who posed no threat. She seemed satisfied with my performance, offering a patronizing pat on the back before leaving. As soon as the door closed, I breathed a sigh of relief, my heart pounding in my chest. That was too close. I knew I had to be more careful. I invested in encryption software, a VPN, and a burner phone, creating layers of security to protect my operation. I started using public Wi-Fi networks, bouncing my signal around the city to avoid detection. I was becoming a digital phantom, invisible and untraceable. The offshore account was the key. Tracing its origins and destinations became my obsession. I spent weeks poring over financial records, following the money trail through a labyrinth of shell corporations and anonymous transactions. It was like unraveling a complex knot, each thread leading to another, revealing a network of accomplices and beneficiaries. I discovered that Sarah, my supposed best friend, was also involved, receiving regular payments from the offshore account. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Sarah, who had always presented herself as the loyal friend, was in on the scheme, profiting from Vivian's treachery. The betrayal cut deep, fueling my resolve to expose them both. I needed irrefutable proof, something that would stand up in court, something that would shatter their carefully constructed facade of respectability. I contacted a forensic accountant, a former law enforcement officer with a reputation for uncovering financial crimes. I explained my situation, presenting him with the evidence I had gathered. He was impressed by my work, but cautioned me about the risks involved. He warned me that Vivian and Sarah would likely fight back, using their connections and resources to protect themselves. But I was undeterred. I was ready to face whatever consequences came my way. I started documenting everything, recording every conversation, every interaction. I installed hidden cameras in my apartment, capturing Vivian's visits, her false displays of concern. I even managed to record a phone call between Vivian and Sarah, discussing their plans to silence me, to discredit my claims. Their arrogance was astounding. They believed they were untouchable, that their wealth and privilege would protect them from any consequences. But they underestimated me. They underestimated the power of a woman scorned, the determination of someone who has nothing left to lose. The waiting was agonizing. I knew that the longer I waited, the more time they had to cover their tracks. But I needed to be patient, to gather every piece of evidence, to ensure that my case was airtight. The anticipation was building, a coiled spring ready to unleash its force. I knew the exact day they tried to end me. I exposed the truth. My forensic accountant, a gruff man named Miller, uncovered Vivian's Achilles heel, her insatiable need for validation. She craved attention, accolades, the illusion of success. He discovered she'd been photoshopping herself into magazine covers, fabricating awards, and even paying for fake speaking engagements. It was pathetic, but it was also a weapon. Her social media accounts were a carefully curated fantasy, a house of cards waiting for a strong breeze. I decided to become that breeze. I began feeding her ego, praising her accomplishments, showering her with compliments, all while subtly gathering intel about her upcoming wedding. The venue, the guest list, the caterer, the photographer, every detail was meticulously cataloged. I knew that her wedding was the pinnacle of her carefully constructed world, the ultimate opportunity to showcase her perfect life. It was also the perfect target. Miller helped me create a website, a seemingly innocuous fan page dedicated to Vivian's achievements. It was filled with glowing articles, mostly AI-generated and subtly sarcastic, flattering photos and gushing testimonials, all fabricated, of course. We even included a fake awards section, showcasing the phony accolades she had so desperately craved. The site looked legitimate, professional, and utterly convincing. I sent Vivian the link, gushing about how proud I was of her, how much she deserved to be recognized for her hard work. She ate it up, sharing the link with all her friends and followers, basking in the glow of manufactured adoration. It was sickeningly easy. Meanwhile, I was meticulously seeding the website with malware designed to scrape data from anyone who visited it. Wedding guests, potential investors, even my own parents. Their contact information, social media profiles, and browsing history would all be mine. The website was the perfect honeypot. As the wedding day approached, I intensified my efforts, subtly manipulating events to create the perfect storm. I learned that the wedding photographer was struggling financially, desperate for work. I contacted him, posing as a wealthy client, offering him a lucrative deal to spice up the wedding photos with some creative edits. I provided him with a list of specific images to alter, subtly highlighting Vivian's flaws, exaggerating her insecurities, turning her dream wedding into a grotesque parody of itself. The photographer, blinded by the money, eagerly agreed. I also discovered that the caterer had a history of cutting corners, using inferior ingredients to maximize profits. I anonymously tipped off the local health inspector, ensuring that the wedding feast would be scrutinized with a fine-tooth comb. The smallest violations would be amplified, broadcast to the world, exposing their deception. The final piece of the puzzle was Sarah. I knew I couldn't let her escape unscathed. I created a fake email account, posing as a disgruntled employee of the offshore bank where Vivian held her secret account. I sent Sarah a carefully crafted email informing her that the bank was under investigation and that her name had surfaced as a potential beneficiary. I suggested that she needed to disappear her assets quickly, providing her with a burner phone number to contact a discreet financial advisor who could help her move the money. The number, of course, led straight to Miller. He was ready to feed her a series of increasingly panicked instructions, leading her down a path of financial ruin. It was a high-stakes gamble, but I knew that Sarah's greed would be her undoing. The wedding day dawned bright and sunny, a picture-perfect scene that belied the chaos I had unleashed beneath the surface. I arrived early, dressed in a simple black dress, my face carefully composed, hiding the storm raging inside. Vivian, radiant in her white gown, greeted me with a forced smile, oblivious to the trap I had laid. "Stella," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness, "I'm so glad you could make it." I returned her smile, my eyes glinting with anticipation. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Vivian." As the ceremony began, I took my seat, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for my phone. The plan was in motion. The dominoes were falling. They thought they were untouchable. They were wrong, the exact day they tried to end me. As Vivian and her father stood at the altar, bathed in the golden light of the afternoon sun, I activated the website. Within seconds, every phone in the venue buzzed with a notification. The seemingly innocent fan page had gone viral, its fabricated accolades and subtly mocking content spreading like wildfire. Guests began whispering, exchanging confused glances, their eyes darting between Vivian and their screens. Then, the altered wedding photos started to surface. Images of Vivian with exaggerated features, unflattering angles, and grotesque distortions flooded social media. Her carefully constructed facade of perfection crumbled before her eyes. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Vivian's face contorted in disbelief, then fury, as she saw the images on her own phone. The crimson drained from her face, replaced by a sickly pallor. Her father, sensing the shift in atmosphere, tried to shield her from the unfolding spectacle, but it was too late. The damage was done. At that exact moment, the health inspector, acting on my anonymous tip, stormed into the reception hall, accompanied by local news cameras.
He announced that he had received a complaint about unsanitary conditions and was initiating an immediate investigation. The caterer, visibly panicked, attempted to block his path, but the cameras were already rolling, capturing every bead of sweat on his brow. The wedding feast, once a symbol of opulence and celebration, was now a scene of chaos and disarray. While Vivian's perfect day imploded, Sarah was busy unraveling her own financial future. Miller, posing as a financial advisor, guided her through a series of increasingly complex and ultimately self-destructive transactions. He convinced her to move her money into a series of shell corporations, each one more opaque and untraceable than the last, and then vanished. By the time Sarah realized she had been scammed, her assets were gone, swallowed by the same offshore abyss that had enriched her for so long. Back at the wedding, the police arrived, acting on another anonymous tip, this time from Miller. They approached Vivian and her father, requesting a private conversation. Whispers spread through the crowd as Vivian and her father were escorted away, their faces etched with anxiety. The police investigation into the falsified documents, inflated invoices, and the offshore account had begun, and Vivian and her father were the prime suspects. The wedding, once a symbol of their power and privilege, was now a crime scene. As Vivian was being led away in handcuffs, she locked eyes with me. Her gaze was filled with a mixture of rage, betrayal, and a dawning realization of the magnitude of her downfall. I simply smiled. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Vivian was fired from the company, disgraced and unemployable. Her reputation was shattered, her social circle evaporated. The media feasted on her downfall, painting her as a greedy, incompetent fraud. Her father was implicated in the financial crimes, facing charges of fraud and embezzlement. The company, once a thriving family business, was now under investigation, its future uncertain. Sarah lost everything. Her assets were seized, her reputation ruined. She was ostracized by her friends and family, left to face the consequences of her actions alone. As for me, I emerged from the shadows, stronger and more resilient than ever before. I presented my evidence to the authorities, ensuring that justice was served. I reclaimed my life, my career, and my sense of self-worth. I started my own company, built on integrity and transparency, a testament to my grandfather's legacy. Looking back, I don't feel joy. I don't feel triumphant. I simply feel relief. The weight that had been crushing me for so long has finally lifted. The score was settled. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's about reclaiming what was stolen, about standing up for yourself, about refusing to be a victim. It's about finding your voice and using it to expose the truth, no matter the cost. And for anyone else out there who has ever been betrayed or wronged, remember this. You are not alone. You are stronger than you think, and you have the power to write your own ending. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.